Welcome to another episode of Project Podcast presented by Project Insulin. I'm excited to have two guests on today, both from my alma mater, and we went to school together, so very cool. Shout out to Brandeis University. And Britt, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hi, everyone. My name is Brit Finney-Conlon. I am a resident of Los Angeles. Went to Brandeis like Eric mentioned. Oh, okay. I'm going to say that again. I went to Brandeis like Eric mentioned, and I am a donor relations associate at the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles. I take pride in fundraising for causes that I believe in, and I am a cat mom.
And James, what about you?
Thanks, Eric. Hey there, my name is James, and I am married to Britt. I work in local government and I work with local government supporting small businesses and advocating for them. And we live in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have you both on because Britt might have been the first person with T1D that I ever met, which was not important to me at the time, but some 10 years later has become a pretty big part of my life. And Britt and James started dating in college, and I thought a really cool perspective would be to share that, like, how you guys met, what were the, I don't want to say trials and tribulations, but what were some of the, ways that you got T1D affected the beginning of your relationship? But before we get there, Britt, why don't you tell us a little bit about your origins? I've been calling it this now recently. Your origin story.
I love it. I love it. We'll start with my first dia birthday, as I like to call it. Diaversary, some call it too. So my origin story, I did not have anyone else in my family that was type 1 diabetic. I didn't know what it was. I remember seeing a commercial once on TV with kids playing patty cake once, and I was like, yep, diabetes, you play patty cake. That was the extent of my knowledge. And I turned 12 because at my 12th birthday, my mom was a little concerned about some of my symptoms. I was drinking water all the time, constantly thirsty. I even wanted orange juice because I didn't know at the time, but the sugar wasn't making its way into my cells. I was munching on candies and cookies and everything. And yet I was 65 pounds, super bony skinny. That is not normal for a 12-year-old. And so it wasn't that I was having all these symptoms. Rather, it's just my 12th birthday came around. And as my mom reflected, she's like, now seems like a great time for her annual checkup with her doctor, her pediatricians. It wasn't like, oh, this big thing happened. When I got to the doctor, it was a week after my 12th birthday. So May 18th, I always remember that date. My mom mentioned she heard about some neighbor's dog that had diabetes. She's like, I just learned about this thing and their dog has it, but the dog has really similar symptoms to my daughter. And given that I am the oldest of my siblings and the first one going through puberty, my mom had no idea that it was anything serious. So she said, given that the dog has diabetes, do you mind checking her blood sugar? They said, yeah, no problem. I did a pee test. It was somewhere in the 2000s, my blood sugar.
Wow.
They were shocked that I was conscious. They were shocked I was alive. I've since taken a lot great meaning to that date. I see it as I've lived past my expiration date in many ways. And the only thing that kept me alive, I think, is that week, my middle school at the time was doing a boot camp for physical education. And we think that boot camp was just enough exercise to digest some of the insulin that was just lack of insulin that was overtaking me, bring down my sugars. Got sent to the hospital, was there for 4 days. And 6 months later, went to a type 1 diabetes summer camp, which was a huge impact on my life. Shout out to Camp Conrad Chinook. And since then, I'm not really big in the diabetes advocacy world, but I do what I can when I can. So that's my nutshell.
Yeah, and it's so funny, like coincidence that you bring up that your blood sugar was at 2000 because literally the last episode, which in my world was a couple days ago, but as far as everyone is concerned, is the week before this. The last person I spoke to was like, my blood sugar was double over the space, like the point where it's like you could be in a coma. He was at 1300, and he was like, "Yeah, I've got the record." And then I was like, "No, Britt officially has the Project Podcast record for highest blood sugar."
I do. It actually, I don't even know how high it was because 2000 was the limit. So it didn't go above that.
Wow.
So I don't even know how bad it was, other than they were shocked I was alive.
Yeah. And 12 is like a very big point in your life, right? A lot is changing in your life, socially, physically, emotionally, just like you are changing at 12. And so, do you remember what it was like to deal with all that? And then on top of that, you now have this diagnosis. It sounds like camp probably really helped anchor you because it was so soon after diagnosis. But could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. I think actually, I often express gratitude for getting my diagnosis at age 12. Having now been to that camp many times and been a counselor to that camp, what I found is those who get diagnosed when they're really little and their parents have to take charge. I have huge respect for the parents, but in the end, the parents will not know what that low blood sugar feels like or what that high blood sugar feels like. So it's really hard for these kids to then get into the habit of being in tune with their body. At age 12, I'm already learning how to be in tune with my body. I remember watching my mom attempt to give me an insulin shot, and her hand was so shaky. I took the needle and I said, "Mom, I'm going to do this myself." And from then on, it was like, this is going to be a me thing. This is my routine. As I'm learning about routines, how to mark my own schedule for homework because it's middle school and I was in sixth grade, or how to plan things with friends, I was also learning how to take care of my body. I also say, though, I prefer age 12 than, say, age 18, or I know someone I knew got diagnosed at age 40. That's really hard if you've already settled into your routine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, oh my God, I've already been dealing with all these things, and now I have this condition. So, in many ways, I'm grateful I was 12 because it was just the right point where I'm already trying to figure out lives. And this is just another thing to add on. Brush your teeth in the morning, brush your teeth at night, floss, and also don't forget to check your blood sugar and give insulin. So, it was just all part of the same mess.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. And so we'll fast forward a little bit. Normally we do a full through
Oh,
your
wonderful.
diabetes
But there's
experience,
so
but
much to tell.
there's so much to tell. But we're gonna skip towards college. So you get to college. Um, First, let's talk about that. What is you're at home, you have your family. It's a lot easier. You've got your routine, like you say. But now you move to college. You're across the country now. For those who don't know, Brandeis University is in Boston, which is pretty far from LA.
As far as I can
And
get. No, I'm kidding.
yes, yeah. As you move back, yeah. Talk to me about what were some of the challenges getting acclimated to college? What were some of your worries? What were some of your
Yeah,
fears?
my first worry was, how am I going to tell my roommate what to do in the event I were to pass out from diabetes? That was one of my first thoughts. When I started high school, when I started any grade growing up, my mom took the liberty of letting the school know, hey, my daughter has type 1 diabetes. Here are the things to look out for. And they took care of me. In college, I had to take care of me. So, although I did have my routine, I was never in that position of going up to a professor. And I did this at the beginning of each semester. I'd said, when they told
Mm-hmm.
me you only get 3 unexcused absences, I went up to them and I said, hey, look, I'm type 1 diabetic. I'm going to do my best to attend all the classes. But if I have a diabetes emergency, I'll try to email you, let you know, so that you know I'm not just trying to miss and have fun, whatever. But I have something I have to deal with. And it was actually really hard. I joke that the reason I moved back to LA was because I got too cold in Boston. But part of that joke really is reflected in how hard it was for me to transition to seasons with my blood sugars. I found
Mm-hmm.
that when it got cold, my blood sugars got high. And when it got warm, my blood sugars got low. And I had a really hard time controlling that roller coaster of up and down and up and down. So it was a huge undertaking. There were some days where I just had to say, okay, I'm not going to do any schoolwork. I'm not going to do any other work. I'm just going to focus on my health today and try to stabilize myself. And it is what it is. You just have to deal with it. Tried to have plenty of juice on hand wherever I could find it. I made sure to tell all my friends, like, hey, I'm diabetic. If I hang out with you a lot, you should know in case something bad happens. And people were very supportive. I remember going to parties and I was like, my blood sugar's low, and someone would run and get me apple juice and just come back. So it was very
Yeah.
sweet. But yeah, it's nervous in the sense of, it's one thing to take care of myself and say I'm fine. It's another thing to say, hey, there's some days where I might not be able to take care of myself and I'm going to need your help. How do you put that
Mm-hmm.
kind of weight on someone if you don't know how they're going to take that?
Yeah, and that's like a very big, sure, like a risk, so to speak, but also it's like a very big, like vulnerability moment, right? Like you have to, you expedite the process of friendship a little bit because you have to be like, listen, if you're gonna be here, I might need your help. I don't expect, like, you never expect it, you hope you never have to, but there is always that chance. Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
And so I'm going to pause here because it's been the Brit show. But now, James, let's talk about you for a little
Yes.
bit. He's down. Yeah, there you go. A little Brady Bunch moment over here. So, James, tell us before you meet Brit, what do you know about diabetes? Do you remember?
I don't remember anything before I met Brett. I just
There
remember,
was no before.
yeah, the first thing I remember in my life was just meeting Brett. Everything else is a blur. I knew nothing about diabetes. I did not, on top of that, I didn't really know the difference between type 1 and type 2. I learned later after I met Britt that in my family there were some people who were type 2, but they never revealed it to anyone. They were men and they never revealed it. They kept it a secret, and it was partially the reason why they died.
Yeah.
It was on both sides of my family. People just, guys, I guess they said, I'm going to die anyway. I don't want to change my lifestyle. I don't want to learn
Mhm.
about this. And there were intelligent people, but there was some sort of stigma or lack of engagement when it comes to managing health. Disappointing. So I learned that later in my life. And when I met Britt, I didn't really know anything about diabetes. I just knew that it was a really significant illness to have. But other than that, Eric, I didn't really know anything.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's very similar to my experience. Like, it was, you just don't know about the difference between type 1 and type 2. You don't really like pay attention. Like, in hindsight, after I met Gabby, my partner, I was like, wait, no, Britt had diabetes, and wait, no, like this person had it, and oh wait, when I was a kid, my grandpa took insulin because he had type 2 diabetes, and I'm like, it's like this peripheral thing, and then obviously it becomes a bigger part of your experience. And yeah, I just want to say thanks for sharing about your family members as well. I think with men, there is like an identity piece to it. There is, we just talked about vulnerability with Brit. It is a lot harder for men to be vulnerable, and it's a lot harder for men to say they need help. And also, making it a part of your identity is hard because your culture might be beer. Like, beer might be a big part of your culture, or carbs in general is a big part of a lot of cultures. Yeah, resonated with me as well. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And so, I guess, like, how did you guys meet? Tell us the story. Big tangent onto the next
Here,
sentence.
can I start?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks. In 2013, there was a college trip that people at our university could sign up for. And the trip was going to Israel to learn about Israel. And it was for people who were Jewish, and they were able to get a free trip. It just so turned out that Britt and I both signed up for that trip. And neither of us were actively going in and saying, I'm going to meet someone who is exactly what I'm looking for, or I don't know what I'm looking for, and I'll find that. We didn't really have any sort of expectations. We were both single. And when we went on the trip and we were actually going through customs, there was a guard, part of the security team. It's like the Israeli TSA. And I remember them asking in a really thick Israeli accent, what was the date of your bar mitzvah? What is the name of your rabbi? And they kept going on and on. And I was like, sure, I could tell you. But in my head, I was like, why are you asking these questions? And I was talking later on to people as we were all sitting at the gate. And I was like, they asked me all these weird questions. And then there was this girl sitting across from me wearing her high school hoodie. I remember it said like senior night. No, it was gray. It was your gray one.
Grad
And
one.
yeah, I remember you saying, yeah, they asked me that too. And then we both realized it was because our names don't sound Jewish traditionally at all. So we just started talking, and I remember we were talking about like creative writing because I learned that she wrote a book. And
It's
this
not
girl,
great. Don't read it.
that's not true. This girl, she just had this energy that was really infectious, and I just wanted to keep talking to her. We didn't sit on the plane together, but fast forward
Can
as
I
I'm
take over from here?
yeah, of course.
I just like this point right here because it's before we both met. The trip is called Birthright, Taglit, as some people know it as. And essentially, they thought that we were two Irish Catholics sneaking onto this trip, as some non Jewish folks might try to do to enjoy a free trip to Israel. I don't blame them. My maiden name, of course, is Finney. His is Conlon. We've since both married and became Finney-Conlon. And they asked me very similar questions. When was your bat mitzvah? What was your Torah portion? All these things. They really grilled us. And so I had never met another Irish Jew that I wasn't related to. So I came on Birthright my freshman year, my first year at Brandeis. James was in his sophomore year. And I went because I was like, this sounds like a great way to make new friends. I still don't know a ton of people at Brandeis. I knew a decent amount. I knew Eric before I met James, actually. But I didn't feel like I knew that many people. So I was like, I want to do lifelong friends. Let's see who I can meet through this program. Because when I first saw James in the cohort, I did not think he was friendly at all. I thought he was a jerk. He looked like he didn't want to be there. He looked like he wanted out of there. I later learned that he hated orientation. He used to not be into orientation at all, which has now changed. He loves orientation now. But at the time, yeah, I was like, oh, this guy doesn't want to be here. I'm moving on. I didn't put even a second thought to it. I just moved on with my life. So when we met, because we were both pulled over, it was like, oh my God, like we have this thing in common. So after getting off the plane, I still didn't know anyone on the trip really. So I said, hey, James, we just met, but do you want to sit on the bus next to me? I liked talking to you. Let's keep talking. And I joked that the rest is history from there because we became bus buddies for life.
Don't even
That that is very cute. So that's the origin story of how you guys met. But Britt, what point in relationships, flings, whatever, I guess specifically in dating, do you decide to tell someone, right? Because again, we're talking about like vulnerability, and that's a pretty big piece. So when do you normally tell people this?
So I am very quick to tell people about it. And it's not even a sit down, okay, let me tell you, I have to. No, it's I'll get food in front of me and we're having a conversation and I'll say, excuse me one moment, I'm just going to put an insulin real quick on my pump before I get started. And they're like, oh, what's that? Insulin pump, diabetes, whatever. Now I've also been very comfortable wearing my CGM on my arm. So it's a very quick, what's that? Oh, it's a CGM. Let me tell you about it. Because of my type 1 diabetes camp, I've been very comfortable being very open about it. One, because it's just nice to be open about a big part of me. And two, I'm always on the lookout in case someone else is, oh my God, I know this person with type 1 diabetes. They could really use someone like you in their lives. Can I put you in touch? And I'm always happy to be that person. I've explained type 1 diabetes to many parents of kids with it, to kids themselves. I remember in synagogue once, I went up to a girl who I saw had a tube coming out. So I was like, oh, I think that's an insulin pump. So I went up to her. I said, hey, do you have diabetes? She started sobbing. She's like, I do. I hate it. And then I said, no, I have it too. And immediately she's like, you do? And she like stopped crying immediately. So I say that because for me, it's who I am. I try not to hide any bit. And whenever someone says, oh, I didn't know you had that, I was like, have you known me? So I'm very quick to mention it. And it's like I said, it's not like I told James, hey, before you start dating me, I have type 1 diabetes. It would have been clear at some point during the trip, oh, we're about to go hiking on the Masada. Let me go grab my orange juice. Why do you need orange juice? Diabetes. Or it could have been while we were eating a sandwich. Oh, what's that thing you got on your, whatever. And I would say, oh, it's because of my diabetes.
You're learning.
So, with all that being said, it came up very quick. I could not tell you the moment that I said it. It could have been a joke how AI plans on getting me first because they can just hack into my phone and give me all the insulin and I'm going to lose that war real quick. Or it could have been something more just like my day to day. But however it came up, I'm truly not sure, but it would come up on day one probably.
Yeah. James, do you remember? Can you confirm or deny when it happened? Do you remember that at all?
I can neither confirm nor deny. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I just learned she's diabetic now. I had no idea.
10 years later.
No, I felt like I always knew. And just going back to the guy versus girls part, I feel like a lot of guys I know who are type 1, I had to see them like putting in insulin, and otherwise they kept it a total secret. And I always admired Brit for being, I think it's courageous, and I think it's really leading a way of creating some like cultural awareness and also helping other people, like that child that she referred to.
Mhm.
I think it's powerful.
It's a very sweet story, Brett, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's one of the like, do I expect a million people to ever watch this? No. But do I hope that one day one person watches it who's like starting to date, or like we did one on getting married, and I'm going to be doing one with a mom who had 4 kids and she had type 1 diabetes. So, like,
Mm.
I know being pregnant and giving birth is like a really big
Yeah.
conversation. So I
We've been
just hope
talking
that
about
one person, yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
We're
I
just
wasn't.
talking about it, but I would love to watch that episode.
Yeah, we haven't planned it yet, but one day that'll be on the list. But yeah, anyway, I think it's like really important to share stories
Mm.
and just put it out there so that if someone does happen to stumble into this, they get to hear the stories, the positive stories. The stressed out parents whose kid who's 3 just got diabetes can be like,
Yeah.
oh look, like Brit's an amazing person, or all these other people that we've interviewed so far, they've made it through it, and it's
I
okay.
want to add one thing too, which is just at my camp, they always had one session. It was usually just one with rotations where they would answer topics that you might not trust Googling or whatever. And so it would be
Mhm.
like, okay, this is the room where they're going to talk about diabetes and alcohol. This is the room where they're going to talk about diabetes and dating or whatever. And it was a chance for campers to just ask their experienced type 1 diabetic counselors, what's it like? Because I'm not there in my life yet. And it was so helpful. And you heard the mistakes they made and how they came through, or the mistakes they didn't make and how they avoided it. So helpful to hear those stories. And we need those stories to be shared so that we know how to help each other out. It's a huge community. It's great. Diabuddies unite.
And James, do you remember, did you have a reaction at all to learning about what type 1 diabetes is? Or like, how did you, I'll say, I don't want to project, but I stumbled through the learning process, and that's very hard. And it's very complicated as the partner of, forget having diabetes, I can't imagine that, but stumbling through being the partner of is like very hard. And you were talking about your mom shaking and giving you an injection, like the first time I gave an injection, I was like super stressed and making sure we were driving. Like she was driving, and I like she needed some. She was going high. I was like, all right, I guess I'm on it. But yeah, like James, like what was that? Maybe like the initial reaction, if you remember, but more some of
Yeah,
the like silly struggles of the beginning.
I was nervous. I was figuring out as I went along, but I was really nervous because I did not know what to do if she went low. I did not know what to do when she went high. Didn't know what would happen if she goes too low, or too high. And honestly, I'm really grateful for all of my experiences because by dating someone, proposing to someone, and marrying someone with type 1 diabetes, I became not only like an ally of the diabetes community, but I feel like I definitely became a better partner
Mm.
in life. When it first started, Eric, I was, I'll be honest, I remember watching Britt make a cup of tea and I saw her opening sugar packs. And this was like 24, 48 hours after learning she had diabetes. I was freaking out. I was like, I like this girl. What's she doing putting sugar in her tea? No. Oh my God. And I was like getting flustered. And she, no, it's okay. I have the insulin to count for. And I said, what? And I was so scared, Eric. I also never really had a sweet tooth throughout my life. And my mom's been super hounding me all my life on my own sugar intake. So I had not the best relationship with sugar to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I really started like here with my understanding and also my biases towards also the importance of people being able to have sugar in their diet, even
Mm-hmm.
non-diabetics. And then I feel like I over time got here, and some things that I learned along the way. One, if we'll just say your partner, okay? If your partner is having a diabetes episode, whatever kind, don't start by saying, "What did you do wrong?" or saying, "How could this have happened?" Start by saying, "Are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you?" And then to say, "I'll be okay. There's nothing you can do right now. We just have to wait for the sugar to go in, or the insulin, or rest." You just need to give positive feedback. Say, "You're doing great. One step at a time. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." If there is something you need to do, make sure that you listen and you understand exactly what it is they need, because maybe they can't form a lot of words due
Mm-hmm.
to the state that they're in. I learned through this to be more empathetic, not be as quick to judge, and then also be a stronger listener, all through the fact that I dated someone and now they're my life partner and wife because they had diabetes.
Hey, James, there's one story I think you've left out that I think is a really good one, is when you were considering whether or not to date me, the conversation you had with a friend.
Yeah. I was nervous to even ask her out because I didn't know how it would impact my own lifestyle. And also, I didn't have a healthy relationship with sugar. I probably had like my own eating disorder where I literally just ate grilled chicken and broccoli when Britt met me. So I didn't really know what I was going to get into. And I was projecting different ways that diabetes could be scary. And I had a friend who fortunately said, "Go for it." And I did. And it changed my life,
Yeah.
truly.
Yeah. Wow. That's you touched on so many interesting points there. I'll start with the sugar specific because I learned about diabetes through Gabby, right? So my version of what all diabetics do is with whatever Gabby does. And so Gabby's on a keto diet, so she doesn't really eat sugar. It's just not a part of what she eats. And so I was like, great. We do our yearly Pi Day campaign on Pi Day to raise money for Project Insulin, but we bring pies. And so I brought keto pies because I was like, great, Gabby, people with diabetes eat keto pies. And then one of our volunteers was like, hey, like, you do know, like, not everyone is people with diabetes eat sugar. They just like, put in the carb count like on the pie, and then we adults can figure out how much insulin to give.
Yes.
And I was like, oh no,
It happens all the time.
so talking about sugar specifically, it's like such a, you know, it's very visceral for me because again, like I learned from the experiences with Gabby, and a cool part about this is that I learned about other people's experiences. Like when you brought up weather, Brit, earlier, I know again, Gabby, humidity bothers her a lot. But I think that's like a general Swedish people don't like humidity. But also I was like, oh, I didn't know it could affect your blood sugars. So I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, it's a cool new one to add to the art.
Everything. And I feel like part of it is that I grew up in Los Angeles where the weather's been stable my whole life.
Yeah.
And so my body just was having the most difficult time adjusting to Boston weather. And it's not to say Bostonian type 1 diabetics have these issues with weather.
Yeah.
Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But at least in my case, I was just so used to the temperate LA weather that when the weather did change, it's weather, it's altitude, it's stress, it's sleep, it's eating, it's exercise, and it's all the above. It's everything.
And it affects everyone so differently. And I think
Yeah.
it's not unique to diabetes, but I think it is a unique thing of chronic illnesses that I don't think people understand is that it affects people differently. And so
Yeah.
there is no cookie cutter way to treat as because there are no cures, but manage chronic illnesses for the most part is that it does affect you differently. And yes, Everyone with type 1 diabetes uses insulin, and then when they're low, they use some form of sugar. But the things that trigger high blood sugars, low blood sugars, can be very different from one
Mm-hmm.
person to another. And the foods that Britt you can eat might be very different than the foods that somebody else can eat. And so, yeah, I think James, hearing it from you and like hearing the pieces that stuck with you early on and that were hard for you really brings that to life because as a partner myself, it's a very different
Mm-hmm.
experience, but very similar at the same time.
I will add
Definitely.
that it's
Can
always
I?
surprised me at, I'll say one quick thing, at birthday parties, if I had an ice cream, right? How people would be like, oh my God, can you have that? And I'm like, okay, you're asking that for the ice cream, but you didn't ask that for the pizza earlier? So that's like my thing is like some folks, they just see sugar and they don't think about the complexities of how sugar then affects our own bodies. And it, like you said, it's different for everybody. Pizza
Yeah.
affects me way more than popcorn does,
Yeah.
but it's always interesting to me, like what he said earlier about like guys versus gals of showing their diabetes. There was one year my camp was short on male counselors and they had enough CITs, just not enough male counselors. And they were like, Britt, you have 4 brothers. Can you be the counselor for this camp? And I was like, okay. So I did. And first of all, they're so messy. Oh my God. Boys are so messy. I knew they were. They're at camp. They just let loose. But with the diabetes, yeah, I remember having conversations with them when they were like, why are you so open about it? And I was like, why not?
Mm, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
They literally asked me that. And some of the boys, it was like split. I'd say 2/3, 1/3. I think 1/3 was also very open about it. They tried to make it cool. They were decorating their pump with stickers, whatever. It was very cute. But then some of the boys are like, I would never want people to know this about me. And it's,
Yeah.
well, at camp, we learn to be proud of ourselves. And when we go out into the world, do we bring that pride with us?
I think that's a really great example. Yeah, a
In my
majority.
experience,
Yeah.
predominantly boys have been more to hide it, and
Hmm.
predominantly girls have been more open about it. Not to say they can't be open or hidden, but that's been the ratio I've personally noticed.
James, like, this wasn't an experience for me with diabetes, but my sister has a rare illness, so I've had this experience previously. Britt tells you something about diabetes, and whatever, let's just say, we'll keep it super basic, that insulin brings down blood sugar, right? Now, you forget that, let's say, in this world. How did you go about, Britt tells you something and you learn something about diabetes, but then you forget, which is totally okay, obviously. But internally, did you have shoot, can I ask her again? Did you have those kinds of conversations?
In terms of forgetting things, I would say the basics, not so much, but
So,
often around. I remember years ago when Britt was changing her pump or filling insulin, I would often ask the instructions over and over again. And I know she had said them, but I often asked over and over again because I always wanted to be really vigilant in case if I ever had to fly the plane solo and administer insulin when she's not able to respond. So for me, Eric, it was always often like over asking because I just wanted to make sure I had it right.
yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, that other side of the spectrum. For me, it was always like with my sister, I'd always be worried because she would tell me something and then I'd be like, oh, shoot. I forgot this like very nuanced, because again, like we said, chronic illnesses are different for every person. And it could evolve within a person over time as well. And I forgot some nuanced thing. And so it took me a while to get comfortable in
Mm-hmm.
my relationship with my sister to ask those questions over again. And it like, not to internally project that is signaling that I don't listen to my sister or
Mm-hmm.
to anybody else, but rather it's I'm trying hard to make sure I get it right. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
I will
James,
say with James, he was very good at the basics. It was like the minute stuff that I think was a learning curve for him, where he would say, oh, your blood sugar's 50. Is this enough sugar? Or is this enough sugar?
uh,
And in the beginning, it was very little. I was like, no, James, I need more than that. I would get orange juice light. And I'm like, no, I'm looking for actual orange juice.
Yeah.
I was so mad when Capri Sun made everything 50% less sugar. And I'm like, no, that's what I used. So it was like a very minute learning curve of just, is this enough? And then, like James said earlier, if I do have a severe low or a severe high, his first response in the past was like, oh my God, how did this happen? No, life happens. Let's focus on how to deal with it. And I can tell you about it later if you want to know. Because there's a lot of blaming. I feel that a lot type 1 diabetics, we experience this like, how could you have this low blood sugar? What did you do wrong? We're human. Do you do everything perfectly? No. And the unfortunate fact is when I mess up, it has bigger effects on my health than the average person when they mess up. If you forget to brush your teeth one night, no big deal. Do it as soon as you can remember. If I forget to give myself insulin one meal, oh my God, the amount of hours I would spend trying to correct that. And so there's this blame game of, why didn't you think of that? And it's because I'm thinking about my body probably every 5 minutes of every day. So it happens.
I think I say this very often on this podcast now, but there's a statistic that people with diabetes make 180 more decisions per day than someone without diabetes.
Events. I email our event directors ahead of time and I say, hey, is there staff meals being provided? If so, what are the meals? If so, what time is it during the event? If so, where do I go to go eat the said meal? Like all these questions that in addition to the regular staff agenda of what am I actually doing at the event, it's okay, let me make sure I make time for me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So thank you both for coming on. I appreciate you sharing your story and sharing two sides of this coin. I guess one last thing, is there anything either of you want to share before we get off? I'll go, James, you can go first, and then we'll wrap up with Brit.
I wish that more medical professionals and supportive medical professionals had the basic understanding of type 1 diabetes. And I also wish that they had more cultural competency to understand how to speak to and listen to a person with a chronic illness.
Yeah. I will say, in terms of wrapping things up, so James and I have been together, it's going to be 10 and a half years in 6 days. We celebrate on the 30th. And over the years, we've really become a team. Anytime I wake up, if I have a low blood sugar, it doesn't matter how tired he is, he will groggily make his way to the fridge and his subconscious knows to get the juice and bring it back. There have been times he forgot what he was doing and then he woke up a little bit more. Oh,
yeah. I was like, where am I?
And so we've become a really good team. He knows exactly what I need. And it's been really nice, the technology, so that he can track me too. That used to not exist. But now, even if he was traveling in Ireland, he'll get notified if my blood sugar's off. And he's like, hey, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm great. This next stage in life is bringing us, we've been talking about wanting kids. And so given that I don't have other type 1 diabetics, relatives at least, I've been looking a lot to the diabetes community on Facebook, on blogs, on websites to learn about what's that process going to look like for me, knowing that in the end, everyone's different and who knows. I love, love, love sharing our knowledge with each other, sharing our stories, because the more we share our stories, the less scary the future might seem.
Yeah. You both brought up topics that could be a whole nother podcast episode.
Eric.
Stay tuned for part 2.
Yeah, Eric, I just want to plug, if there's anyone watching this show who is thinking about becoming friends or asking out someone with type 1 diabetes, but you don't really know what it's all about, I'd say best piece of advice is being vulnerable with someone else and letting in new experiences can bring a lot of joy.
Yeah.
My response is if they've handled it this far, they can keep going.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. And to everyone listening, thank you for listening to another episode of Project Podcast by Project Insulin. We will be back next week, probably. I don't know what the schedule is. And I always make these outros too awkward. So have a great day and talk to you guys soon. Thank you guys